The goal in this video would be to help to sell yourself best for the purpose of a job interview. And there are 5 or so topics I'm going to talk about next. First topic. In a job interview, you would ideally want to sell yourself on your best stories. Okay, so let's say you prepare 10 stories which are the best and you'd want to use them during the interview. Now, what actually happens during the job interviews is some interviewers will actually push for some experiences from a role where maybe your stories were not the best. So how would you deal with such a situation? You know, maybe there's some overlap between your best stories and those type of experience. Maybe there's some core competencies that you would want to talk about more than others. Or simply, you know, you could simply raise the quality level of those stories if you prepare a bit more. But long story short, if you only prepare your best stories, then you should know that it's not only your best story that's going to be asked during the job interview. Okay. Second thing I like to talk about here, the definition of behavioral interview is that they use your past experiences in order to screen your future performance on the job. So therefore, you know, the more recent your experiences that you talk about, the more relevant will be for the employer. Okay, so there is this thing that many candidates try to use their most recent stories in a job interview on the reasoning that, hey, they would be the most relevant and help their interviewers screen themselves for the role. However, in my experience, it's not always that your best stories are the most recent. Right, so then what's the fix here? How would you address with such a scenario? Well, one way to address it would be to use your best stories. However, not to specifically mention when it happened, you know, and then if they ask, okay, you could tell them, hey, yes, this happened 15 years ago. And they could even follow up with, hey, could you have a story that is more recent and whatnot? But still, you would use your best story compared to the most recent one, okay? Number 3, the star format. Like, is the star format the most compelling way to deliver your answers? Because it's certainly practical advice for an employer's point of view. You tell you, hey, structure your answers like this because this is how we understand each other best. But is this the best way to sell yourself in a job interview? To give a number of other approaches you may use here, you might dramatize here, or you might use the DIGS format, which is a format which dramatizes, then, you know, go on with the story continuing that. But the point here is that you should use the format of the answer that sell yourself best. For instance, some other candidates always end with the learnings that they took from those experiences. So this is also something that might bring value in the way you sell yourself for the purpose of a job interview, right? And if you think this is small fish, you know, structuring stories in the star format or not, well, you know, then probably the most common reason why people fail interviews these days is not because they don't prepare them, but rather because their answers are flat, nothing interesting. Okay, so how can you sell yourself best in these job interviews? Number 4 here, metrics. Okay, so it is well known and often a good advice that you should use metrics. You should quantify whatever possible in your stories. However, there are some scenarios where using metrics might not be to your advantage. Okay, and if I give you a quick example here, the iPhone 16 was recently launched, and they said it has a bigger battery, which naturally means it increased battery life. But they never quantified that. They didn't insist on that because they knew that was only a marginal improvement, which wouldn't be the main thing in their presentation, right? So basically, this goes the same way in a job interview. If you know that metric or quantifying information wouldn't sell yourself best, then probably you shouldn't. Okay, so question is for you: is quantifying information the best approach to sell yourself in a job interview? Who knows? Maybe you want to do a motivational style of answer, and when you do with motivational stuff, it's not always a good idea to quantify information, right? To make your answer sound more memorable. Okay. Number 5 here. it is more often than not great advice to interview slowly. That is, to really listen to the question you're getting asked, even pause for a few seconds to think, hey, what's the best answer? This is simply because, this is a common reason why people, especially for more senior types of role, get disqualified. You make a monumental mistake and you fail it, right? However, there's also the opposite of that. When you interview as quickly as possible, because on the reason that some people, if you speak faster, chances are you will be perceived as a better candidate, right? I'm not saying this will always be the case, but if you look at this on YouTube, the most convincing people and people with the best engagement also are oftentimes people who speak faster or are the most reactive. Or when you give an interview, you can track great speakers. They answer it on the spot. Or even politicians, they don't take their 15 seconds to think of an answer, right? They just give the answer on the spot because they want to sound convincing. So there's the slow interviewing and there's fast interviewing. It's very much up to you, and the question is for you, what level of risk you feel comfortable taking, right? And finally, number 6 here, your strength. So there is this common interview question, what's your strength, which is not as common these days. But my point here is the following. Do you know your strength going into a job interview? And if you know your strength, chances are that's the strength you like versus the strength you have. So for example, when I was younger, I really enjoyed coding algorithms, and I really thought I was a great developer. Well, it turns out it wasn't the case. I have other stuff which I'm much better at, right? So this happens as well in a job interview. You must really find what you're actually good at, selling yourself on, versus what you like to think of yourself for the purpose of the job interview, right? And last but not least, success sells in job interviews. So needless to say, sell yourself on your successes in these job interviews, because you'll be amazed how easy it is to maybe end your answers on a slightly negative note, or even to omit some results in your story. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.